Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, everybody. Great to have you all here. Obviously, the panelists will come around to you guys very shortly and introduce ourselves. But welcome everybody who's tuned into this webinar this afternoon. Just a little bit of familiarization. You will all have access to question and answers or posing questions. There's also the chat where you can send messages across to either all the panelists and or everyone that's in attendance. There's obviously facility as well to raise your hand. If you do that, obviously I can come to you if you've got a question, if you want to actually speak and contribute to the conversation, we'd love that. But obviously just bear with us. There's a lot of people in the room right now, so we will do our best to manage that. As you can see up on the screen right now, is our corporate partners and partners who support ARC360. And again, it's a huge thank you to these companies that have helped make this possible. This time last week, we were all set to host an event at the British Motor Museum. 2 days later, come Friday, we postponed that event for obvious reasons, which we're going to touch upon. And you know, these guys have supported us and everything that we've done this week in pulling these sessions together. So really do appreciate that in terms of the support everyone's given us over these past couple of days. Sorry, that's mine. Now, just before, again, we go into too much, what I wanted to do is, again, offer these up a little bit of a disclaimer in terms of obviously what we're about to discuss. This whole piece is evolving at a rapid rate of knots. None of the four panelists are coronavirus experts. Certainly we all know about it, obviously, from the news that we're seeing. But the views and opinions, and again, I'll read this out, it just makes life a lot easier. The views and opinions expressed during the following webinar are those of the individual contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributor's employer, organisation, or other group or individual. And what we're also saying is please respect all contributions, and we encourage you to join the conversation via the interactive functions, as we've already just said. So let us get ourselves a little bit started and apply a little bit of context really in terms of discussions that we're about to take place. So first and foremost, I think we do need to kind of address the fact that this is obviously a health pandemic. Health and well-being of society is, you know, the overriding or primary concern amongst all of this. We are here to discuss, obviously, the impact it's had on our sector, or is having, or is likely to have. And it's become a real global economic emergency, if you like. Only yesterday, the government promised grants, relief and business rates, promises of grants, relief from business rates and government-backed loans worth more than 300 billion. So this is a big, big piece that's going on there right now. Again, we're here to discuss our industry, and what we want to do is, again, raise the issues, start the conversation, and just get everyone involved in terms of contributing. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen with all of this, where it's going to go, but our piece in this is to try and pull conversation and opinions together. So our panelists for today, we have Mr. Chris Weeks, from Executive Director of the NBRA. We have Chris Ashworth, AVP of Enterprise Holdings. We have Gary Barker, Claims Director, AA Insurance. And we have Mike Partridge, Paint and Body Business Manager, Volkswagen Group. What I'll do is I am going to hand it over to each of you in turn. And if you could just give those people who have just tuned in, if they don't know you personally or haven't, your paths haven't crossed, if you could just give them a little insight into kind of your day-to-day role, and we'll say that day-to-day role pre-pandemic. So Chris Weeks, if we can go with you first.
Yeah, so I head up the National Body Repair Association. Spent a lot of time in the past in insurance companies, accident management companies, etc. My day-to-day role really is just looking after the interests of about 800 of the body repairers in the UK. So we're supporting their interests, doing what we need to do in terms of lobbying with government, with insurers, providing services for them and everything else. So that's the normal day-to-day job. But of course, it's quickly changed over the last sort of week or two.
Great stuff. Thanks, Chris. Chris Ashworth.
Hi, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. So Chris Ashworth, I'm the AVP of Arms Business Services Division of Enterprise Holdings here in the UK. I guess I look after four things here at Enterprise. I look after our claims operations for our customers in the replacement sector. So that's the insurance companies, the accident managers, the body shops, the motor claims sector. I look after the claims operations for our own fleet, so 140,000-ish vehicles in the UK, and the fastest car in the world is a rental car, in case you didn't know. So they tend to be involved in the odd prang. I look after supply chain, so the repair of those vehicles, whether it be service, maintenance, repair, or accident damage, and last but by no means least in the current climate, I look after a technology business, Integral, CAPS, BMS and Eclipse.
Thank you very much, Chris. Gary.
Yeah, I'm Gary Barker. I'm the Claims Director for the AA's underwriting business. I'm responsible for motor and household, and the household business is outsourced, but all of the motor businesses run here in my location in Tunbridge Wells. So I deal with all of that from soup to nuts, really.
Great stuff. Thanks, Gary. And Mike?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Partridge. I am Paint and Body Business Manager for Volkswagen Group UK. My principal role is being responsible for the Paint and Body franchise, so ensuring compliance with all the various regulations, block exemption regulations, etc., as well as the performance of the paint and management of the Paint and Body network, the approved Paint and Body network in the UK. My day-to-day job is mostly looking at spreadsheets. I'm still looking at spreadsheets, it's just they're telling me different things now.
Well, thanks for that, Mike. You've sold your job to us. So everybody, thanks very much for joining us again. Really appreciate this, and I think this is a great initiative in terms of getting the industry having these conversations. So again, we'll kind of take it in turns in terms of answering these questions or area topics of conversation. But for you, Chris Weeks, when did all of a sudden the challenges start to kind of appear? When did we really start to take note of all of this impacting on our industry?
Yeah, so it was about sort of mid-February, really. We started to get sort of concerns. Obviously, China have been having their problems. And we woke up to this pretty quickly and started sort of messaging that initially that we thought we were going to have a big parts supply chain problem. So because of all the issues are out in China and the Far East, we were very concerned initially that, and a lot of manufacturers have their components built out there, by the way. It's not just sort of Chinese companies. But we thought we'd start ending up with a supply chain problem. So we started messaging that and, making insurers, accident management companies aware of that. But of course, it's quickly turned into something far, far bigger than that. So, just before I start here, I just want to say, recognise how stressful it must be at the moment for all the body shops out there. They're very uncertain times at the moment, and I'm sure people are, making decisions on a daily basis that they don't normally have to make. So it's going to be very tough for them in the coming weeks. So I just want to say that, I think the industry is definitely coming together to help everybody.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. Yeah, great stuff, Chris. And Chris Ashworth, from obviously your perspective within Enterprise, have you kind of seen this coming, so to speak, sweeping across the globe?
I think the extent and pace to which it is evolving is surprising all of us every day. And that's one of the most difficult things when we're looking at operational planning around this. I think, you know, probably as soon as the MBRA started focusing on the supply chain side of things, we'd obviously been doing the same from a vehicle supply perspective. You know, by 2 million vehicles a year, it's important we look at our own supply chain. In terms of, I guess, the moment where we saw immediate economic impact, in Italy, our business is a franchise, and unlike in the UK, where we're very balanced across fleet, corporate, government, replacement, and to a much lesser degree for us, tourism and transport. In Italy, the franchise operation is very geared around transport. So, you know, seeing airport bookings fall off a cliff, seeing cars parked on runways at airports as people stopped going to Italy was probably the first time we kind of said, you know, wow, this is going to have some big economic effects. Like Gary, not yet seeing the downturn in claims volumes. I'm sure we'll focus a lot more on that during the course of this webinar, but we've only got to look at the streets outside to see, you know, as it stands right now, there are fewer vehicles driving around, which points towards fewer of them bumping into each other, you know.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, same point to you, Gary, really. Has there been, you know, any real impact, you know, as it stands today in terms of claims volumes or what you're currently seeing in the market, or is it all, you know, this is what we currently predict is going to happen?
I don't think we've seen much of an impact in claims volumes. Chris and I were discussing this just before the line went live. The impact has been on our staff, really, you know, they, like just about everybody else in the UK, are very anxious about what we're doing, how we're going to get through this problem. We track our claims frequency very closely, like all insurers do. We're correlating it against the incidence of confirmed cases of COVID-19, but we haven't yet seen, I had expected to see a more marked drop in frequency. I haven't seen that. I think we'll see it when the schools close. I think the schools are probably going to close this weekend. That's what I've heard. So I suspect that will happen there. But in terms of the impact of the coronavirus on our normal business as it affects our customers, it hasn't had that much impact yet.
Yep. Okay. And Mike, same thing to you, really. Did, you know, from a vehicle manufacturer perspective, when did the sort of pending challenges start to come into view, if you like, and certainly from a UK vantage point?
Well, I mean, globally, obviously, pretty much straight away as the crisis hit. I mean, we're a global manufacturer. We've got a lot of production in China, a lot of, as been mentioned before, in terms of supply chain in China. So we saw this coming fairly quickly. In terms of the UK, we had contingency planning in place pretty quickly as a result of that, mostly because we were seeing what was happening out with our sister companies live. You know, Lamborghini are part of the group. They're based in northern Italy, so once it started impacting in Europe, again, we were very, very aware of what was happening, and or as much as we could be, and the impact it was starting to have. In terms of the UK, I think we're in a similar situation to Gary, actually, in terms of the biggest impact seems to be on our staff. We have always said that we would follow the government advice. So when the government advice on Monday was that people should work from home if at all possible, then that was the policy. So we now have an empty office in Milton Keynes, and plenty of people working from home, testing our VPN and our IT infrastructure, which is so far holding up. Obviously there's you know, we're anticipating a major economic impact. In terms of what we're seeing today, we haven't seen that yet. We've had one or two lines, particularly where they are of Chinese origin, a slight capacity issue there, but we've talking to our parent company in Germany as well as the UK distribution operation this morning. There is currently no impact on part supply into our networks, be they retailer networks or body shop networks. Now, obviously, I can't speak for other manufacturers in terms of their situation, but at the moment, touch wood, we're looking in a pretty decent place. The task now is to try and maintain that and try and maintain as much as we can a degree of normality, which is obviously going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. In terms of your respective businesses, and again, this is kind of one that is worth sharing, this best practice, perhaps before we delve too far into the further conversation about the industry. But what steps have you taken in terms of your own businesses, in terms of trying to contain this, trying to manage it, and just trying to continue business as normal?
Yeah, so I mean, from our point of view, and I'll be stand corrected by the body shops that are on the call, but they haven't seen a lot of change at the moment. The work levels, they've got a fair bit of work at the moment, so that's the sort of hangover, the standard sort of booking in procedures. Body shops have got work, and they've also got their staff at the moment, so people are starting to go off sick, but not in massive numbers. We're hearing that customers are starting to cancel jobs, and some of them are sort of saying they want to keep hold of their car because it's drivable. Some staff are going off and they're on sick pay, which is a concern for sort of some body shops. So a lot of them are currently paying the basic pay, the standard basic pay for sick, which is starting to have a bit of an impact on their business. Now, in terms of parts and things like that, as Mike said, we're not seeing too much of an issue at the moment. Obviously, Ford and PSA made their announcements yesterday that there could be problems, and we'd be hearing today that Mercedes might have some problems, and possibly even TPS as well, Mike, in terms of the sort of German borders and stuff. So we don't know. All we know is there'll be more. As Gary said, like the insurer claims, we're hearing some conflicting views about this. So, we're hearing sort of 10s to 20%. I hear what you say, Gary, that you haven't really been affected yet, but they're starting to go down. So, the current situation for the body shops is not a lot different, although they're very, very worried. And so we've been providing information at this point out to our body shops, which is really the standard information around, making sure that they're looking after their staff, making sure that the hygiene is there and everything else. We've been giving them practical advice, and also we've been providing with information about employee rights and things like this, sort of sick rights and everything else like that from an HR point of view. So at this point, we've not really given body shops anything other than enough to keep going in the situation they're currently facing. Yeah,
and I think that's you can kind of only deal with the moment in time, really. And I think by the time we finish this call, something's likely to have changed. So we are dealing with the right here, right now. What about yourself, Chris? In terms of enterprise, a global organisation, probably a lot we can learn from perhaps the way you guys have done things.
Yeah, so I guess if I talk at the macro level within enterprise, and then I'll kind of dig into my part of the business, which is I guess much more closer to this audience. I think as a global organisation, we're looking at keeping, sounds dramatic when we say the world, but certainly the countries in which we operate mobile. For me personally, who've spent all my career in the claims sector, all of a sudden being part of the fabric of a big global organisation like Enterprise, you realise that at times like this, we need to keep the national health moving, the government moving, the military moving. Gary's organisation will be in the same part, but same place. And making sure that those vehicles are available to meet the needs of ultimately potential requisition by government. So that's been eye-opening. We're making sure that we stay open. We've got 500 local stores. Every single one of them is open as we speak. I guess that sort of local agility helps us from a business continuity planning perspective. The field teams who are working incredibly hard right now have had to change the way they interact with customers, so that brings a very different challenge. Cleanliness, you know, the hygiene factors, the social distancing when we're moving goods and people around is a challenge. If I dig into my specific area, which I think will hopefully resonate a bit more with the audience, and you know, maybe I certainly wanted to participate in this to learn, as I've done throughout the webinars during the course of today, but hopefully, you know, there's maybe some opportunities for people to, you know, pick up the odd bit. I'm looking at three buckets in my business. You know, we've got frontline, we've got the leadership team, we've got the support functions. I'm trying to kind of take a generic approach, so people first. Are they well? How can we keep them safe? Learning a lot more about our employees' individual circumstances, whether it be asking sensitive questions around whether they fall into vulnerable buckets, whether they have access to the internet and computers at home. As we all recognise, disaster recovery, business continuity planning, you may as well throw them out the window. You know, this is unprecedented, and anybody that says they've got disaster recovery or business continuity plans that are just ticking through the boxes and pressing the buttons, I don't buy it for a second. So people first, just starting to think about the well-being of those people as we move through this. You know, we're all in different circumstances. What does being cooped up at home for long periods of time mean for people that are on their own, maybe separated from their children? This might seem very bizarre or light-hearted, but our American team in the technology business hosted a dance party on Zoom last night. Being very British, I watched from a distance. I didn't turn my webcam on. I kept my shirt and tie on and didn't throw any shapes. But you know what? Seeing kids and families having a bit of fun during the afternoon, I think, yeah, I've got part of my team thinking about that. And I think we've all got to be more thoughtful for each other at this time. We're looking at partners. And when I say partners, I mean partners, you know, for when Eddie showed it before, you know, this is, you know, from the transactional through to the coalition, whether that be body shops, whether that be our partners at the innovation group who are doing a great job, whether it be our partners at our engineering team at IMS, you know, it's a time to pull together and maybe just ask that question that says, how can I help you? You know, have you thought about anything else? We're certainly not going through, even though we are being subjected to the email that says, can you please urgently send me your BCP plan? What does that achieve today? Processes. Gary and I were talking offline. Disaster recovery, can we stand up a few home workers? We've got 100,000 employees. You know, up until 2 weeks ago, our systems weren't built to have 100,000 people on a VPN. So the tech teams, you know, everyone's doing a phenomenal job standing our processes up. Priorities, you know, so I'm kind of on the 3 Ps at the minute. People, process, partners. Processes for us is about, you know, what can we do? What do we need to do? And as the market starts to change, where are our priorities going to shift? And, you know, lastly, because there's a saying in our business that, you know, if you do the right thing and you listen to your employees and your customers, the profits will follow. I think we're doing a really nice job of resisting any short-term thinking, any kind of profiteering. And I think, you know, if everybody does the same, we've got more chance of getting through this as a collective industry. So apologies for rambling on there. It's quite a big business.
So Gary, I mean, from an insurer's perspective, call centres, people heavy, if you like, in terms of labour. You know, how are you kind of going about dealing with this?
I think I'm really pleased to hear Chris be so candid about what he's been going through, because we're in a similar position, and business continuity plans up until this pandemic have really been building continuity plans. Nobody's really planned for what happens when the problem is with the people, not with the building that the people belong in. So we're in that boat too, because we have a large contact center, and it wasn't designed to have people work from home. So about a third of our people can work from home, and about 2/3 until very recently weren't able to. So the focus on our attention has been, like it is an enterprise, on looking after our people first. Our people are very nervous. I thought it's a very interesting insight of what I've learned about how some people cope at work with actually quite debilitating illnesses that I had absolutely no clue they had. It's completely news to me. I reckon a good 10% of our people have got are in the vulnerable category, and you wouldn't necessarily know. So our emphasis at the moment is to get that home working solution stood up. I think we're about 5 days away from being able to get everybody that is able to work at home, i.e. they have the space to do it, doing it. My goal is to have that completely squared away by the middle of next week. Our first big test is happening now, actually, whilst we're talking. And then I think the challenge for us then is to understand, how do we run our business, look after our people and look after our customers, when we won't see any of the people that we normally do that with. I think this is going to be a tremendous test for the leaders in our industry. I said to my own senior team earlier today, this is not a test of technology, it's a test of leadership. How do we adapt to looking after our people? Our people need to feel held. They need to feel that we're more flexible, that we're going to go out of our way to understand that life for them is really, really very different. So, dealing with isolation and stuff like that is a problem that's much further down the track. I think initially we're going to have a period of euphoria where people have never worked at home before. A lot of youngsters will be whooping and laughing, and they can take insurance claims in their pants and all that sort of thing. Take them wearing pants, not in their pants. And that will pass pretty soon, and we'll have to work out how we're going to cope with that. So the emphasis, as Chris has said, is the same. Look after our people first, look after our customers, we'll worry about the money afterwards.
Yeah. And Mike, you've already kind of alluded to several lessons that you're learning from your sort of partner regions around the world. Is there anything else you kind of want to add in terms of how the UK is currently approaching this pandemic?
I'd love to be able to offer some insight there, but unfortunately I can't. But I mean, in terms of what we're doing, we're learning whatever lessons are out there. This is completely unprecedented. There is no rule book, as I think has been mentioned before. The contingency plans don't have section 4.3 global pandemic. So it's so the only thing that we've got to go by is other people's experience, and so if we can learn from anyone's experience, we absolutely will. We're not arrogant enough to suggest that we've got all the answers.
Yeah, sure.
And just echoing what's been said before, is the people thing is a massive thing. We are a slightly smaller organisation in the UK. We've got 1,000 head office staff. We have call centre staff in Leeds at our customer contact centre, as well as people that work in our warehouse in our national learning centre. We because I think we're slightly smaller, we've adapted to well, I'd like to say we've adapted to home working quite quickly. That's maybe some of us have and some of us haven't, but we do what we have to do. If there are lessons to be learned elsewhere, we will absolutely learn those lessons.
Okay, so we're all in agreement. We're kind of on the cusp of something unprecedented, some sort of uncharted territory. there is a bit of an indifference in terms of opinion, what's happening out there already within the market. What are going to be the first signs that we're likely to see, and how soon do we think that's really going to start to hit home? Chris Weeks?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. Look, I think be under no illusion, right? If we carry on the way we are, and the way that the other parts of Europe have, we are not wishing to sort of be too alarmist, but we are heading into, you know, pretty much a catastrophe for body shops. There's every chance, you know, as social distancing increases, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen next in terms of that. You know, we might do it different to others, but you know, when you look at other countries like Italy that have been through this, they've seen claims volumes reductions in the magnitude of 50 to 70%. That's catastrophic for body shops. At the same time, you know, we're going to have more staff either going off sick or self-isolating because someone in their family is, you know, showing the signs. You know, 14 days is the current sort of advice, and then, you know, even then you've got the potential that somebody off for 14 days could get, you know, show the signs themselves on day 13 and be off for another 14 days. You know, so we've got a significant problem here of volume that's likely to go down and staffing levels that are likely to go down. What an awful challenge for body shops to have to try to deal with. You know, an average kind of body shop could easily have like 90 grand's worth of overheads they need to cover off every month. You know, forgetting parts and paint and everything else. So they've got a lot of money that they're going to have to find just to keep turning over. And, you know, that brings us to the point of cash. They haven't got cash. You know, body shops haven't got cash. Some have, some got, you know, but on the whole, they're ranging between, you know, 2 or 3 months max to next to nothing. You know, some body shops could be going bust overnight, pretty much. Cash is a massive problem. And in the midst of all this, you know, they're having to make decisions every day about sick pay, about paying suppliers, you know, whether they even try to carry on. So I know I'm being very sort of alarmist about this, you know, but what we're facing next, be under no illusion, barring, you know, what the Chancellor might have come up with, you know, putting that aside to one moment, you know, body shops have got a tough time, you know, and I've been messaging this, you know, for the last sort of week or two to, you know, anybody that will listen, because the writing has kind of been on the wall in all the other different countries around there.
Yeah. Gary, if I just come across to you in terms of the referenced declining claims in Italy, rumoured to be 50, 70%. I mean, you know, dare I say it, are we even considering that at this moment in time from your perspective?
I think it's really, really hard to know, Mark. I think there's definitely going to be a drop in frequency. I think claims frequency will drop by about 20% over the week that follows the closure of schools across the UK. Typically over the Christmas holidays, for example, claims frequency in what I would call a normal motor book drops by about 20%. I then think there's going to be a contraction over quite a short period of time beyond that, if we get more severe constraints on travel, and as more businesses like ours adapt to home working, where previously that wasn't their model, maybe that will take it down to 30-40%. Is it likely to get to 70%? I can't see it, and if it was, I'd be very, very surprised if it was prolonged. I think the issue that Chris is talking about is real, though. I mean, what is going to hurt all of these businesses is cash. That's the lifeblood that they don't have very much of, typically. They're normally high turnover, low margin businesses.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it before I joined this discussion. I really don't know what we do about that beyond the government funding that might come through. You know, insurers can pay bills quicker, for example, or maybe they can do stage payments to help with the purchase of parts and stuff like that. A lot of this stuff was in our thinking. These are things that I've discussed with Chris in the past in our preparations for what we thought might happen with a no-deal Brexit. Ironically, we're getting the symptoms of a different problem manifesting in the coronavirus. Our business is certainly happy to discuss them. But I think we'll have to do something, because if the supply chain constricts too small for too long, we're going to be in big trouble when all these claims start to come in later in the year.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Chris Ashworth, so from your perspective, again, you know, what are you kind of seeing UK centric, and what are you kind of anticipating, you know, near, medium, longer term?
Yeah, I think short term to medium, we will see claims volumes drop. That impacts us. A key part of our business, you know, is the insurance replacement sector. So, you know, that presents a challenge. Body shops for us are critical business partners, whether it be keeping our fleet moving, whether it be keeping our customers, policyholders on the road, and you know, to a much smaller extent, you know, business customers in their own right, whether it be them renting vehicles off us or buying software from us. You know, they're critical to the survival of our business. I think if I look at, you know, we're not the only industry, we're not the only sector that is going to be impacted economically. We've all seen, you know, what's happening in the travel sector. I know today is about focusing on that, and in particular body shops. I take a little bit of comfort that the industry we all work in, which is motor insurance, is very resilient. You know, it's a compulsory purchase. It takes a lot to happen to the economy before people start selling their vehicles en masse and decide they don't need transportation. So there's a bit of me, the glass half full part of me, says our industry, you know, will be there. What I do think we need to look at right now is how we help the larger number of smaller body shops see this through, because, you know, our worlds don't work without a body shop industry as we come out the back of this. As enterprise, I think we're probably in a very similar situation to Gary. We've already had some internal discussions, and I think, you know, everyone has to be empathetic here that we've all had our own priorities. You know, this isn't a case of, we haven't given any thought to the body shop sector. People, our own employees, our own processes, looking after our customers, and now thinking about our business partners is front of mind right now. So paying more quickly, you know, we like to pay quickly anyway. I know there's some contracts out there that are 60, 90-day payments. You know, we try and pay quickly, and any of our supply chain that are on the phone right now, if you need paying more quickly, you've got my contact details. We'll help you through that. Paying for parts, so repairs can progress, not out of the question. Starts to get tricky when we talk about paying for repairs in advance. Starts to get tricky when it talks about cash. You know, every business is looking at its own purse strings at the minute. So you know, the last thing on my mind, and I'll say on this, is as a rental business, we've been doing a lot of work with government at the moment to ensure our operations are able to keep supporting the needs of government through this crisis that we're deemed an essential service. Said to Chris on a call yesterday, more than happy from an enterprise perspective to help with any government lobbying that the MBRA chooses to lead. I think to a much lesser extent, my involvement in ARC360. We'd like to keep this channel of communication open so the industry can talk and collaborate. And you know, one of the reasons I put myself forward for this panel was to hear from people like Dave Sargent. You know, how can we help? Because you know, we need to understand what we can do as an industry together.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, where the whole kind of concept of this comes from, really. You know, the event ARC360 is very much targeted about bringing the industry together. Our hand was forced in terms of how we do that on this occasion, and do you know what? I think it's a pretty kind of key thing for the industry to do, to continue to talk. You know, I said it earlier in one of the webinars, but you know, nobody's an island. We're in this together, kind of thing, and we just need to find ways through it, really. Mike, coming over to you in terms of, we've kind of, you know, talked about a little bit on parts and the fact that, you know, at the moment we're all good. What are your kind of key concerns, again, you know, near future? What's the real consideration from your point of view when it comes to, obviously, the repair aspect?
Again, back to the obvious statement of nobody really knows. But at the minute, I'll tell you what we're seeing at the minute. So at the minute, in terms of part supply, I know that I'm not officially representing Volkswagen Group today, but I can only talk from kind of first-hand experience here. What we're seeing is a massive decline in demand across mainland Europe, which means that there is plenty of supply, but that's no good if the rest of the industry isn't functioning as it would normally do, which currently nobody would expect it to do. I think because we're anticipating a decline in repair volume, we don't think that we will have a supply issue. There's certainly nothing within all of the forecasting that there's various different forecasts that are running, but there's nothing that would throw up any alarm bells immediately. The thing is, it's how do things progress from here? Because obviously with plants shutting, with supply chains breaking in some instances, what does the future look like when you know, touch wood, we're back on track and we've got a fully functioning industry again? And that's the challenge, is you know, what does that look like, and what can we do? I mean, in terms of little practical things, I mean, what we're trying to do is prevent the law of unintended consequences. We can make an awful lot of decisions now that we think are for you know, for the right reasons and that kind of thing, but have a knock-on effect down the line. So whatever we do needs to have quite a bit of careful consideration. There's certain things that we can do to try and alleviate the burden a little bit. So for example, we suspended our audits, and we're not requiring any face-to-face training at the minute. Now that sounds small when you compare it with the you know, all the problems that the industry has got at the minute. But these are small things that we can do to hopefully alleviate some of the pressure at the minute. I don't want to be contributing towards the pressure felt in the industry, and so if there's any way that we can alleviate that, then we will do that. Obviously there's other parts of the organisation that have got their own policies and are adopting those accordingly.
Sorry, we're hearing the sort of German borders are closing. How are you going to sort of get around those kind of issues to get the parts into flow?
As far as I'm aware, the German borders are closed to people rather than product. So unless the news has broken since the reports I've heard, so product is still flowing as far as I'm aware at the moment. Like I said, keep saying nobody really knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but at the moment the borders for product are still open and they're flowing. We have daily meetings, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day with our central distribution centre in Kassel in Germany, and they are still anticipating regular and normal delivery of parts throughout Europe. So at the minute, it is business as usual, as much as it possibly can be. But we've all got to watch this space and see what happens tomorrow.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mike. And some really great messages coming through that we're kind of seeing via the chats. Again, Brexit preparations, increased stock holding, local stock holding of parts. So that's, potentially something that could be a bit of a saving grace to the industry. In terms of kind of moving the conversation on, I suppose, and it's a very easy thing to say, but can we start to talk solutions at this point, how we can kind of collaborate, work together in any way, shape or form? Nobody's going to wave a magic wand and this is going to disappear. Everyone's obviously got to protect their own assets and their own businesses. That's completely understandable. So we can't declare all of a sudden that everything's going to be free flowing and the world's going to be a good place again. But what we can do is, start to look at perhaps, what opportunities can we explore? Chris, Weeks, you got any kind of, take on that from a body shop repairer's perspective? What are they looking for?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know what they'd like, put it that way. So, the MBRA held a cross-industry call last night with, a panel of insurers, the leading parts people, accident management companies, and, the leading rental companies at Enterprise. But, we were asking exactly these sort of things, so the general rhetoric out there from repairers will be that, claims volumes go down, motor insurers are going to see less claims, they're going to have more money in their pockets. Gary's already panicking. How can they support us? They should support us, is what I'm sort of hearing. And I kind of raised that yesterday. And by the way, there is some proper basis for that. So, if claims were to go down by, let's say, 50%, if we're going to be sort of pessimistic about it, at normal rates that prevail in the market now, that would cost an insurer about 9 million quid, okay, in a month. We've asked some repairers to do some calculations, bearing in mind the sort of the overheads that they've got and everything else, what it would take, with half the claims to just get through the next 3 months and break even. The easy go-to is the piece that you don't like to talk about, the labour rates. But if they were to double, then over the next 3 months, the repairers could break even. Now that would actually represent, with half the amount of claims, a claims cost of 5.5 million for an insurer in a month, which is a 39% reduction on what they would spend normally. So I can understand why repairers are asking and saying, well, this is a reasonable request. But from what I got gleaned from the call last night, that ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen because the insurers, and Gary, you can jump in here, they work in a very competitive environment themselves, and trying to get agreement across the piece for everyone to sort of buy into something like that, especially when some insurers have got completely differentiated strategies, like owning their own body shops, or, they might have already done sort of deals. Getting agreement on those sort of things isn't going to happen. So therefore, you're not going to get it across the board. However, wind the clock forward 3 or 4 months and let's sort of paint a really sort of gloomy picture of the industry. Because I'm pretty good at doing the gloom. Let's say there's only 60% of the body shops left in 4 months, and they could run out of money very quick. What do you get then? You've then got the theory of supply and demand coming into play. Just like the price of hand sanitizer has suddenly doubled because there's not much of it and everybody wants it. You could be in a position where in 3 or 4 months, all the claims come back to where they were, and there's a lot fewer body shops. So what happens then? You're then going to get supply and demand, and you'll have free market rate will change. You know, bearing in mind everything that the Chancellor's done, it might avert all this. So what we could see, and what we might encourage, is individual insurers, accident management companies to start thinking about that future world now, where there could be, significantly inflated claims expenditure, and start buying capacity now, doing deals with body shops at, better rates than they are currently, but maybe lower than they could be in a free market. We've done, there's no clear thinking about this whatsoever, but I wouldn't be surprised if insurers right now are thinking, it could go that way. Let's do a deal and hedge our bets. So trying to say...
Shall I jump in, Chris, and give the sort of insurer's perspective? So, and also answer the question that Tony Lowe put on the question board, which is much the same as you're describing. If insurers are going to have reduced claims frequency, we'll have a surplus of funds. Why can't that be fed back to body shops by way of increased labour rates while the frequency is at a lower level? And I think there are a number of reasons why that is very, very unlikely to happen. The first one is frequency is only part of the calculation. We don't know what's going to happen to our severity. If parts do dry up or labour becomes much more difficult to source, then the economics of the situation means that these things will become more expensive. We don't know what's going to happen to our third-party spend. If these things slow down the repair of vehicles, all of our hire costs are going to go up. So we don't know what's going to happen to the severity part of our claim equation. The other factor is we don't know what's going to happen to price. Now, the price that insurance is sold at, our industry sadly has got a very bad track record of predicting, of pricing in reductions in price to premium before the benefit of it's really been felt. So I think that's another factor to be considered. It would not surprise me at all if we saw a price war develop in this environment where people racing to the bottom, particularly those who felt that their supply chain might be more secure than others. And the final factor, which you've already touched on, Chris, is an insurer can't act to do this in isolation. And our industry has never, in my experience at least, responded as one body, because they're not. We're a bunch of competing businesses all trying to outdo the other. So unless the whole market says we should try to secure our supply chain by increasing labour rates, for example, to take up Tony's point, an insurer is not going to do it. Now, a consequence of that might be that the market shrinks, like it has in other markets, and when we're on the other side of this problem, prices are higher. But typically what happens when prices are higher is it attracts new entrants, and the number of players increases. They're just not always the same players that were there before. I don't want that to happen. That's not what I'm advocating, incidentally. That's just an observation of what I think is likely to happen. But I would be astonished if a single insurer decided in isolation to help prop up their supply chain by increasing an outflow of cash to businesses that we already know that are quite frail.
Mm.
Is that kind of taking that across to you, Mike, from a, again, vehicle manufacturer perspective? I mean, is that a more viable proposition from a VM perspective, or again, is it the same as what Gary's kind of explained in terms of market forces will just simply come into play?
From a VM perspective, it's a difficult one to offer an opinion on, to be perfectly honest. No. It's I mean, that's a relationship between an insurer and a body shop. Taking into account economic forces, I can see Gary's argument that it wouldn't necessarily happen because market forces would effectively prevent it from happening. I think the challenge, though, I mean, the reason it was asked is around survival of body shops. And we've now got a 3-month period where we really just have to focus on getting through to the end of that 3-month period. And I think people are coming up with creative solutions to see if there's ways around that. And I think whilst not all of them might be viable, we've got to listen, and we've got to listen to the industry. When they've got ideas like this, we've got to seriously consider them. And if they are practical, because it's in all of our interests for this industry to remain as intact as it possibly can do, when we emerge from the other side of the crisis, then we've got to take these requests seriously. We've got to look at them seriously and give them serious consideration. And again, in terms of what we can do as a manufacturer, we can be the people that listen. So if you've got, I will reach out to the repairers on this webinar and just say, if you do have creative ideas for survival that you think that we can help with, then please let us know. They may not be viable, they may be viable, but we will certainly take them seriously.
Yeah, I think we're certainly in that same situation.
Right, guys, I'm very conscious in terms of time. Everyone's got busy schedules right now for obvious reasons. There are some questions that are still open, and what we will do is, to those people who have asked those questions, we will direct those on to the panel beyond today and try and get some response. Again, very conscious that this thing is just moving at a rate of knots right now. So conversations, what we've had, close at 2:30 today, come 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock this evening, could be, completely different kind of ground. So just on a closing note, if I can just kind of skim across, all contributors, what would your kind of closing piece be? Brief sort of statement in terms of, the webinar today, the industry at large. What would you say to everyone out there? Chris Weeks, to you.
Well, don't panic. It's going to be easy to feel like that, but we're British, for God's sake. In 2 weeks' time, we might be sick of not dying and just decide to go back to work and stuff it. But I think I'd say that it is very uncertain. It's changing every single day. Every single day, there's new information. There's things changing. The government policy is changing. I think the NBRA will stick by you. Okay, the Chancellor said he'll do whatever it takes, and we'll do whatever it takes. We don't want body shops failing, so we're going to continue to keep providing you with information, advice, as it is relevant at the time, and we'll just hold your hand through it.
Great stuff. Chris Ashworth?
Much the same, but I think we need to keep talking, and we need to keep listening, more importantly. I appreciate the concern of the body shops, the industry, where they want solutions, but I think, as every stakeholder on this panel has made the point, we need to understand what those solutions are. We need to help people understand why they may or may not be possible or viable. So I think Gary's point was fascinating for me, which is that whole, fewer claims, lower claims costs, must have money in the bank to pay bigger labour rates. There will be insurers that take that straight to price, and in these uncertain economic times, that's going to matter to consumers. The general public is going to have less money, so someone popping up with a cheap insurance policy, because we created these aggregators, is going to make them switch. So I think understanding, the wider problems of the industry can only be helpful. I think it's a time for the body shops to put forward suggestions, and for us to decide as an industry how we can help. I know there's been some points made on the chat around, can we help reduce costs, whether it be systems, that sort of stuff. So I don't think it's all just about revenue. Mm-hmm. There's costs, I think there's payment holidays, I think there's paying faster. I think there's, redeploying capital and services, as the market shift. But we've got to keep talking. That's my big take away from this. And you know, my offer on behalf of Enterprise, we want to be part of that discussion.
Definitely. Gary, any sort of closing note?
Yeah, I just hang in there. It's going to be difficult for all of us. It's been the toughest couple of weeks of my career I can think of. It's been really stretching. It's a real test of leadership, as I mentioned earlier on, but we are a pretty resilient bunch, and this is a very, very resilient industry. And I'm absolutely certain that when we come out of this, I don't know, maybe if that's middle of the summer, late summer, we'll be stronger than we were before we went into it.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thanks, Gary. Mike?
I would say three things really. Firstly, do whatever you can to get through the next 3 months. You know, think the unthinkable, and you know, fire ideas at us if you think that we can help. Secondly, beware of law of unintended consequences. So don't make decisions that have a knock-on effect that would be completely counterproductive. And finally, and I think most importantly, keep yourself safe and keep your employees safe and your family safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic stuff. So really appreciate the time from your panelists. Again, it's a brave thing to do, kind of standing up and being counted during these you know, unknown times. So thank you guys very much for that. We as ARC360, I Love Claims, are very, very keen to kind of continue this discussion now. You know, and we're quite happy to facilitate this kind of thing on a weekly basis at the moment, because that's how this thing is moving. So we'll be in contact with everyone that's obviously attended the webinar, and obviously all of our kind of clients, and just to try and keep this thing moving, keep the conversation flowing, because I just think at the moment that's, you know, a real key part of all of this is just understanding each other's challenges, each other's issues, and where the land lies in terms of how this thing is moving. Thank you very much to all the attendees that have come into the webinar today. Really appreciate it. Again, this thing is kind of, we could have discussed it all day long, I'm sure, but we've all got busy day jobs to get back to and attend to those challenges that are being posed to us right now. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, and we will catch up with you next week, no doubt. Speak to you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Mark. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.